Nothing beats a afternoon coffee. Really and truly. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and this is the Astral Library, and another month is done in 2024. February is well and done. In fact, the day I'm recording this, it is March 1st, so we are just at the start of the new month. And February feels like it took forever. And it kind of did, because we had an extra day in February this year, but it was just a busy month. And I feel like I didn't have any time to read. But looking at like my stats for this month, I read a total of 9 books, which is more than 2 books a week. So clearly I was reading something, and I was reading often, but it didn't feel like it, like in the slightest. So I have a giant stack of books to talk about today, some of which I read for fun, some of which I read for school, some books that I've started this month that I haven't got a chance to finish, and of course some fan fictions for you guys that I've been reading and enjoying and just absolutely loving. So let's go ahead and dive straight in. Okay, we're gonna start with the nice and fun books. So the books that I read for fun, that I just purely picked up for enjoyment, maybe I read for my 24 for 24 challenge, those kinds of things. So the very first book I have is Obsidio by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. So this is one of the books I read for my 24 for 2024 challenge. So the vlog of this should already be uploaded. So if you don't know, Obsidio is the third and final book of the Illuminae Files series, which is a kind of like sci-fi series told through mixed media, particularly like through video transcripts, IM messages, emails, a whole bunch of stuff. Art we have included in it. And I can't tell you what this book is about because it's, you know, the last book in a series. But in the first book, we are following our main character, Katie, who used to live on this planet Carenza and had to flee as the planet was being invaded one day. And as the planet's been invading, she's running for her life and she gets on board one of the 2 ships that are able to like make it off the planet and kind of dash off into space. However, she's being chased by these same people who invaded her home planet. And we also find out that there's a bit of an AI on board the ship that is maybe up to something. So you guys saw my entire reaction to this book. And oh my god. I gave this book 4 stars and it earned every one of those stars. I had so much fun with this book and just the series in general that I was just like on a roller coaster of emotions. Like particularly the end of this book had me gripped, it had me screaming, it had me wanting to throw it. But all in all, I had such a great time reading this. And it went by relatively quickly, even though this is like a massive book. I flew through it. So I'm not gonna go too much in depth for this book because I did have a whole vlog dedicated to it. But yes, I absolutely loved it. And I highly, highly recommend it for anyone who is a sci-fi lover, but like intimidated by sci-fi, because this is a great like starter sci-fi series. So it's a great series. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue in it, while also having a lot of action and really fun and vibrant characters. Not only who we see on the page, but even the people translating the documents were really fun and have a lot of personality to them. I highly recommend the series. It's so good. It's so much fun. And this third and final book really closed the series out in a way that I just felt super satisfied with. The next book I read is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. So I actually read this for a bookshelf like scavenger hunt vlog, which is coming out I think after this video, so that's something you have to look forward to. But essentially, I had a series of prompts I had to go scourging around my bookshelf for, and it led me to this book here. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, not because I think it's a bad book in any way, but the headspace in which I read this book just wasn't the best time for it. It is a combination between fiction and memoir, in which Machado is talking about an abusive relationship she had with her ex-girlfriend and how she fell into that relationship and how she slowly lost herself in that relationship and even how it ended. It's a gripping tale and it's hard to read at times. And it has some like really great pointed messages of like how the archive excludes people and only paints certain narratives. I love that about this book. But what made me give this book a 3 stars is that it felt like a book I would read for homework and for like my own dissertation process. And because of that fact, I just like wasn't having a great time because I was trying to read for fun and it felt like I was still reading for school. And I think that just really just like sunk my feelings about the book, even though again, I would recommend this book to a lot of people. And this was a book recommended to me by one of my classmates at the time. So I can see why they recommended it to me and just generally all the great things about it, but it felt like school. And so I could only give it a 3 star because I was just like not having a great time reading this. Though I do think this is a book I would love to return to and read again, if only to give it a more fair of a shot. But again, I did really enjoy this book, and I highly recommend it, even though I'm only giving it a 3 stars. And then the third and final book I read for fun was Lore by Alexander Bracken, which is another book off of my 24 for 2024 challenge. The vlog for this one is coming out soon-ish, so you will get to know all my thoughts on this one. Spoiler, they're not great. I end up giving this a 2-star rating, even though it has these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stenciled edges. I love them so much, but the book was just not it. So in this book we are following Lore, our main character, who is the sole surviving member of her family that used to belong to this world that would hunt down the Greek gods. So every 7 years or so, the Greek gods would become mortal and would be hunted down by various families descended from like other Greek heroes and stories. And if those gods are killed during this period, or this, I think the ceremony lasts by like a week. And if any of the gods are killed during that time, the person who kills them inherits the gods' powers. And so it's just an all-out brawl trying to kill these gods and get their powers for themselves and to boost the family up. Lore's family was killed by another hunter family, and Lore's been on the run ever since and has been hiding from them until one day Athena shows up on Lore's doorstep and demands that she helps Athena out and ensures she survives. And in return, Athena will help Lore kill the person responsible for her family's death. And so they kind of create this unlikely alliance and have to figure out the whole mystery of what's going on and how and survive this very deadly game. I gave this 2 stars. I'm not going to say too much more about it because I have a ton of complaints that I explain in my vlog for this. In fact, I'm pretty sure you're going to see me in this outfit when I talk about how much I did not enjoy this book. So be on the lookout for that. Just know I had issues with this book. So many issues. We're gonna put it down and not think about it anymore. No more. The next sections of books I have are books I read for tutoring. I tutor a few kids and I work with them and read certain books with them, just kind of help them with their reading comprehension as well as how to learn to analyze books. So I have a couple of those, and I have books I read for school. None of these I'm going to go too much in depth. I might tell you a little bit what it's about, but these are just things I'm reading. I'm keeping you in the loop of what is crossing my reading path, because that's what this channel is all about, reading in every scope of the word. If you're ever a person that's like, oh man, I don't know if I should include this in my wrap up, do it. Do it. It is okay. Anything you read is reading. It doesn't have to all be fun books. It could be things you're reading for work, for school, anything. It counts. It counts towards your goal. I promise. You're still reading the books. In fact, sometimes if you're not counting those books, you're just doing more reading. So your goal should reflect that. Include it, okay? Here's the sign to include whatever you're reading. Doesn't matter what it is. That being said, one of the first books I read was Kira Kira by Cynthia Kadohata. So this is a middle grade historical fiction book set in about the 1950s, I want to say, in the South. I think it's Georgia, yes. So this is set in the deep south of Georgia, and we're following a Japanese family who is moving to the south and kind of encountering racism and battling a sickness in the family. So in particular, we are following our main character, Katie, who is about, I want to say like 12 or so by the novel's conclusion. And the whole story is through her perspective, and we're learning what is her family life like? What is it like being Japanese in Georgia, the 1950s, which is rampant with racism and Jim Crow laws? And more importantly, how is she going to deal with her sister's illness when she comes down with an aggressive form of cancer? I read this book first when I was in elementary school. And so when my little student was like, I need to read a historical fiction book, I was like, okay, what about this one? And she really enjoyed it. She really liked it. We had a lot of fun with it. It was nice revisiting this book as an adult, because as a kid, it hit hard, but as an adult, like seeing this child really having to like face racism and not quite understand what it was just touching on a different level. I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed getting to reread it. The next book I read for that same student, she just has to read 500 pages, and she decided to choose a book that I'm very happy she did, because she chose Sammy Keys and the Hotel Thief, which is the very first book in the Sammy Keys series by Gwendolyn Van Dreyen. If you know this channel and you saw my bookshelf tour, you know that Sammy Keys was the series to get me into reading and to like just really hone in my love for reading. And so getting to revisit this book as an adult was so fun. Was so much fun. So if you don't know, the Sammy Keys series is a middle grade like mystery detective series, kind of like a Nancy Drew, where Sammy is just starting her first day of 7th grade. In this story in particular, she is spying on people with her binoculars, and she actually spots a thief in the hotel across the street from where her grandma lives. She gets involved in that whole case. There's something like $4,000 missing. No one saw this man but Sammy, and she's seeing hints of him around town because he's hitting multiple places. I love this book. I forgot how much I love Sammy until I read this book, because she's just such a no-nonsense person. Reading this now as an adult really shows just like how Sammy was the archetype for my perfect female lead, because we see Sammy not only just being respectful to people who are respectful to her, but she takes no shit. Like, zero shit whatsoever. You start talking back to her, she gives you sass right back. You mess with her friend, she'll go up and punch you in the fucking face. It was so cute coming back to read this and really getting to just see how much of an influence this book had on my reading and still has on my reading taste. It was fun. I'm so glad she chose this and I got to come and revisit this book. It does make me want to go back and read the entire series again. That might be a fun vlog, actually. I might have to do that because I flew through this book. Of course, it's not that long whatsoever, but I flew through it just mentally and had such a great time. So we might have to do that. I might do something like How to Train Your Gavin does, where I read an entire series in a video. That could be fun. But let me know what you guys think about that. Those are the two really fun ones. We're about to get into a list of ones that aren't so fun, but I did read for school. The first of which is American Culture Between the Wars by Walter. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that name. I will put it on screen. It is a name. This is a book I am reading for my dissertation. So where I'm at in my dissertation process is I'm about to submit what is called an areas petition, where essentially I focus on 3 areas of study within English that I'm going to essentially market myself as an expert in. And in those lists, I have to come up with a set number of books and articles and primary works in that field to kind of like showcase my expertise. So a lot of what I'm going to show you guys is for my main areas of expertise, which is on 20th century Black American literature and narratives of modernity, which essentially means that I focus around 20th century. So like, I want to say my literature spans from about 1910 to about 1945, so just before the start of World War II. And narratives of modernity spans beyond that. It's just theories of how we kind of imagine the modern world and how we're defining this category of modernism. Very much nerd shit, okay? But this in particular is a book that is focusing on particularly the 1930s and just like what is American culture like during this time period, because it's a very different time than prior to World War I and to what happened after World War II. We're seeing a lot of influence from Black creators and jazz and immigrants and the working class, and even the proletariat and communism are starting to really start budding during this time period. So this is a book that was just dedicated all to that. And then I read Left of Poetry by Sarah Ellers. So this is a recently published book, and by recently I mean 2019, which was actually Ellers' dissertation for when she was a doctoral student, so that was kind of cool to look at. In particular, this book is focusing specifically on poetry, and specifically poetry of the 1930s, and how historically it's been left out of the conversation when we're talking about modernism and talking about just like the 1930s in general, and the significance poetry had during that time. So this is a book that my mentor suggested I read, and it wasn't super pertinent to what I'm doing, but it was a really good example to look at how you turn your dissertation project into a book you can publish, which is something I will need if I'm ever trying to get tenure at a university. So that was really cool, and I really loved what Ellers was saying about the archive and how it's missing moments in the archive and how she did archival work in this text itself. Really interesting. And this book is just like beautiful. Like, it's so pretty. I love the colors and just the blues. It was very appealing, even if I didn't always enjoy the content of the book. Next, I have this chunky boy called The Cultural Front by Michael Denning. So this is a book that is kind of like the American Culture Between Wars book, but more extensive throughout the history. So this is particularly looking at the cultural left, which is a movement in modernism that is looking specifically from the 1920s to the 1930s and looking at how the Great Depression is really significant in this area and how we're defining modernism. So this gives a little more focus on the immigrant movements going on in the 1920s and the 1930s. It is looking at the move of communism happening in the US during the 1930s with the Great Depression, It is looking at the combination of like Black, white, Asian, and Mexican races kind of in the working class and how that's contributing to our society, and this idea of the protest being a really key component of American culture. Very interesting book. Very thick book and kind of dense. So this was something I'm very glad that I was just reading and discussing with someone else who was more of an expert in this, because at times I was like, I don't know what the heck this is saying. And I don't know what the heck was going on. But I read it and I have notes and highlights. So like that's all I can ask for. And now it's getting super dark because it's gloomy always. All right, and the last book I have that I read for school is The Harlem Renaissance in Black and White by George Hutchinson. So this is a book that is focusing specifically on the Harlem Renaissance, which is my main area in literature because I'm interested in Black voices and Black art that happens in the Harlem Renaissance, which is roughly like the 1920s, like the late 1930s, early 1940s. And in this book in particular, we are looking at how Hutchinson is looking not at the Harlem Renaissance as a purely Black movement, but a combination of Black and white artists who work in combination with each other to kind of create this multiracial view of the Harlem Renaissance that is not normally viewed and talked about. Typically when we think of the Harlem Renaissance, we think of Black voices and Black art, but there was a lot of collaboration going on between white Americans and Black Americans at the time. And so this book is really going through the history of it and looking at all the works that are being produced in combination with each other, as well as just generally the biracialness of the movement that is not talked about a lot. I didn't find this book like super particular to what I'm doing because how I'm looking and using the Harlem Renaissance in my own study is looking at it as a movement of Black voice. That is what I'm interested most in. But it was really cool to look at the ways in which white authors and Black authors were working in combination, particularly because a lot of times when people write off the Harlem Renaissance and don't include it when we're talking about stuff like modernism or just like the 1920s in general, it's because they think of it as a Black only movement. This is a book that is very much discounting that, saying, nope, everyone is working to this. This is a major period of literature and art being produced, and discounting it as only Black is actually detrimental. Also, my mentor is like, yeah, Emily, if you like that book or like want to talk about it more, like that guy was my dissertation chair. So like I can hook you guys up. We can meet. I'm like, please don't. I don't need to talk to someone who's going to be way smarter than I am and tell me that I potentially am not understanding his book at all. So we're going to leave that till I feel like I'm a smarter person. So never. So those are all the books that I read. But before we move on to the fanfiction, I want to talk to you about the books that I started reading this month that I haven't had a chance to finish, but I do plan to finish in the next month. And the first of those is Gutter Mage by J.S. Kelly. If you saw my birthday book haul, you know that this is a book that I was dying to get my hands on for years, but I was like iffy about spending the money on a price because I never read this author before, but just something about this book like kept calling to me. I think after I finished reading In a Dream House, I was like, you know what? I'm going to read whatever I want. And so I grabbed this book. And I'm not far into this at all. I think I'm about 50 pages, maybe 60 pages. I'm 65 pages in and 10 chapters in. And I've been enjoying this book so far. I just haven't had a lot of chance to like sit down and read between everything else I've been reading apparently. So I haven't had a chance to like really sink my teeth into it. I am thoroughly enjoying this book and I'm enjoying the main character. She reminds me a lot of Sal the Cacophony from Seven Blades in Black, which you know is a series I loved, and Sal in particular is a character I adore. Yeah, I am looking forward to getting more of a chance to like sit down and read this and to like dive into it. I think I don't have any like major plans yet that is going to impede me from getting a chance to like sit down with this. I expect thoughts on this one soon. And the next book I started is a chunky one. And I'm going to take this book so slow because I'll be honest with you, I'm not excited about it, nor have I heard a lot of great things. And that is, oh God, House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas, which is the third and final book in the Crescent series. And she chunky. She's like almost 900 pages chunky. What do I say about this series? I loved book one. House of Earth and Blood was my favorite book the year that came out. It was my favorite read. And every time I go and reread that book, I still cry and I have a great time with it. House of Sky and Breath, I hated. I thought it was awful. It took me so long to realize I wasn't having a good time that even when I finished that book and I had that cliffhanger, I thought I was enjoying it. But the more I thought about that book, the more it put me into a slump, and like I had a really hard time getting out of that slump. And it's just because like I felt like in that book it lost a lot of what I loved about the first book. And so I was not excited for this one because of just the way the second book ended And I'm gonna put a spoiler here, so in case you haven't read it and you plan to read it, spoiler, come back when the tag's off the screen, okay? At the end of the book, she ties this book to the ACOTAR series, which I did not want in the slightest. One, because I'm done with ACOTAR. I have no plans of reading any spin-off she does. I've never read A Court of Silver and Flame. I didn't read the like novella book she had in the middle. I had no desire to. When I was reading it, A Court of Wings and Ruin was the last book, and I was happy with that ending. I saw no reason to go back to it, and I'm not going to. So her tying it to a series that I didn't care to revisit or go back to, I was like, really? But again, just the way the second book was, and it felt very much like a boys book, and I like didn't get that main character of Bryce that I wanted in her perspective, and it just felt like everything was dragging in that book. All that to say is I'm not excited about this book, especially because I've been hearing not great things about this and just people not enjoying it. So I'm trying to set my expectations low. So I'm not expecting anything out of this book except to hopefully have some fun and recapture what I felt in that first book. I don't have high expectations for that at all, but I'm hoping for just a little bit. So far, I'm on chapter 2, which is roughly page 30. So I've just cracked into this and it's okay. I'm not hating it so far, which is good. I would be upset if I got 30 pages in and already hated it. You can see I am not that far into it at all. We're gonna keep going through this one. Maybe I will finish this next month. Maybe I won't. But I'll let you know. I'll keep you in the loop. Especially because my friends, like, you have to read it so we can talk about it. And how much she hated it. So like I said, I'll keep you in the loop on what my thoughts are. So those are all the books that I read this month. But like I said, I want to include more fanfiction on this channel, so we're going to be talking about some of the fanfics that I read this month that I've been loving, or fanfics that I reread and I loved, because fanfiction is one of my biggest sources of reading. I do it every day, every morning, every night, so I want to share the fics that I've been loving throughout the month, and I need my notes for this one. So for this month, I have 4 recommendations for you. The first one is In the Blood by BiscuitBrunch. So this is a Harry Potter fanfiction that specifically focuses on Draco and Harry. Oh my god, this is a long fic. I'm talking over 200,000 words, I believe. And oh my god. I tore through this fic. It was so good. Don't read the synopsis for this fic, by the way. This is one of the ones that the synopsis does like the thing that like sometimes books do, where it like gives away too much of the plot. That is this fic, okay? Do not read the summary for it. Skip over it and just dive into it. But in this fic, we are following Draco and Harry post the events of the book. So they are both grown up. Harry is an Auror and Draco is a lawyer, and they cross paths and are still in that rivalry and like poke fun at each other. Of course, there's that sexual tension between them. And one day that sexual tension snaps and Harry kisses Draco and their relationship starts blossoming, sort of. We're definitely going through this relationship very carefully. It's not instant lovey. They're both going to have to work towards this, especially because Draco is coming from a mindset and a family that views gay relationships in a very negative light. And so we see that kind of internalized homophobia within himself and having to fight against it as he accepts and starts falling for Harry in return. It's such a beautiful story that deals with a lot of like mature themes like internalized homophobia, but as well as child abuse and like the hardship of opening up to people and like being vulnerable to someone who could potentially hurt you on both sides. Neither Harry nor Draco are like the perfect character in the story, and that's one of the things I love about fanfiction, is getting to explore those nitty-gritty sides of characters. Everything about this is so good. I love the relationship. I love the way it was handled. I love romance in this. It was like swoon worthy, but also just like hit you in the angst, like the perfect moments. And I love how long it was. I love a fic I can sink my teeth into and read for hours and hours and hours, and this one was just chef's kiss. So good. Some tags for this fic that to watch out for is, one, again, we have internalized homophobia. We do have an mpreg in this, which is not everyone's thing. And I feel like if that's something like it turns you off or you're just kind of like squeamish about it, you can skip that part of the story. It's very late in the story that it happens. And I feel like you can easily stop reading at that point and still feel like you have a fully complete story. It is definitely an explicit fic, and it does get some very gratifying sex scenes. So again, any fic I talk about will always have a link in the description to where you can read it for free on Archive of Our Own. Please go give that creator some love for writing a whole beautiful story for free on the internet. Go leave it a kudos, go leave it a comment, let them know if you read it and enjoy it. As someone who writes fanfiction, getting those comments are just like the best part of my day. Speaking of long fics, do I have a long one for you? The next fic I want to recommend is No Paths Are Bound by Cataclysmic Calamity, which is a fic based in the Heaven Official's Blessing fandom. And whew, when I say this fic is long, I mean this fic is long. Like, it's over 1 million words long, which sounds intimidating and ridiculous, and it kind of is. But this is a fic that retells the entire story of Heaven Official's Blessing. So it goes through all 8 books. So that's how it got to 1 million words, okay? This author left no stone unturned. Well, you can categorize in one choice. You can categorize it as a canon divergence because we are following the canonical event, but we have like one minor change. But I would probably more categorize this as a canon AU because we are still following the events of the main story, but we have changed a key detail that has like a domino effect on everything else. So if you don't know, Heaven Official's Blessing is a Chinese Danmei novel that follows our main character, Xie Lian, who is a god, like an actual god. In fact, he is a god that has a tumultuous past as he was actually banished from heaven twice. And we are following as he rises to heaven once more as the god of scrap collecting. He is this very kind, very nonchalant person who just wants to help others out, but finds himself in the middle of a lot of trouble. I cannot express to you how much I love Heaven Official's Blessing, okay? It is such a beautiful story. It has so much angst. It has so much great romance between Xie Lian and his love interest. It is a compelling story that has a lot of intricate moving parts to it. I love every second of it, okay? It's one of the best pining stories I've ever read, okay? Ever. So good. So good. And this fic takes everything I love about that series and expands it by like 100 because it is so in-depth with everything. It connects details that are just like a passing thing in the original novels and gives it a lot more significance and meaning and just like rips your heart out. So good. I love it. It's one of those fics that you can, even though you may have read the entire series of the original novels, you can still read this and really enjoy everything about it because the author changed just enough to give it intrigue. And even though you may know the next event, you can still be surprised by what happens and how the minor change we started with has this cascading effect that makes the story more engaging. It's so good. It's so good. I cannot stress to you how much I enjoyed reading this. And this is not something I read just like in a day. This took like all of February, okay? All of February to read, and chef's kiss. And if you've never heard of Heaven Official's Blessing, please pick it up. It's so good. It is one of those series that I think more people should read and that more people need to talk about because it's just so fun and so engaging and just such a great romance story. Ugh. Though I will say that Chinese Danmei novels take a little getting used to in just like how they're constructed and how they're written. It is not like Western writing at all. So if you're looking to like get into it, I think Heaven Official's Blessing is a really good gateway into that genre, especially because it has an anime adaptation. I think it's a donghua is the Chinese equivalent of anime to it, which you can watch on Crunchyroll. Or Netflix. I believe it's also on Netflix, which is so good that follows the first book pretty closely, and that can kind of help ease you into the story if you find the book a little jarring on its own. But again, highly recommend it. Highly recommend the fic and the original series. Both are great. You will not regret picking up either one of them. Okay, the next fic I read is the 15th chapter from this collection called No Act of God Could Pull Me Away From You by Taizi, which is a collection of loosely connected one-piece one-shots. Which a one-shot is just like a fic that is like self-contained. It's not part of any series. And it's usually on the shorter side. So Taizi is one of the authors I just adore when it comes to writing One Piece. Particularly because they are really good at capturing just the friendship and emotional connection between the crew of One Piece. So like between Luffy and Zoro and Nami and Sanji and all the rest of them. I love their writing so much. And they always manage to like tug on the heartstrings and just make you feel for these characters. And this collection in particular focuses on the One Piece crew, and chapter 15 focuses on how the crew feels about Luffy and just how he's this magnet for them all. Lovely. I will leave a link to the specific chapter I'm talking about. I highly recommend anything in that collection and anything by Taizi that has to do with One Piece because they just are such a master at it. So this is a genfic, which means there is no romantic relationship. So if you're not kind of in it for the romance and you don't really have a shit for One Piece, Taizi is a great person for that because they write such a great friendship aspect that you don't even feel the need for romance sometimes, or even that you could read romance into it. It's not, there's subtext to it, but nothing over. But again, they're focusing more on friendship between them all, which is a really key part to One Piece as an anime. All right, and the last fic I want to recommend is Sorcerer's Bane by BeautifulFiction. And this is a Merlin Arthur fanfiction from the BBC series Merlin, which that is the series that has ruined Christmas for the rest of my life, okay? Oh my god, I cannot tell you how much Merlin has ruined my life and has ruined Christmas specifically. Like, if you know, you know. And this is not the video to inform you of the glory and the tragedy that is that show. But just let me tell you, man, just, it hurts my heart even when I think about it now. But Sorcerer's Bane heals that a little bit. Fanfiction in general from the Merlin fandom heals it in general. So like I said, Sorcerer's Bane is a Merlin Arthur fanfiction that is a canon divergence. So we are following the series as it happened in the TV show until about, I want to say it's season 3, don't quote me on that. And we have a moment that departs from it and completely changes the story. Specifically, while Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table are off on an excursion, they encounter bandits that end up taking Merlin captive after they think he is Arthur, and they torture him and end up putting him in a specific chain and collar that was designed for people with magic powers, to which Arthur never knew about. And as Arthur goes to rescue Merlin, he finds out that Merlin is in fact a sorcerer, which is completely banned in Camelot and could actually get Merlin killed if that is found out by Arthur's father. And so we are not only getting to see how is Arthur himself dealing with this secret being revealed between them, but also as their relationship starts growing closer as Arthur begins to accept Merlin for who he is and learning more about magic from a more open perspective. It's so good. It's another really long fic, so something you could really sink your teeth into. And what I really enjoy about this is that we have a lot of pining between Arthur and Merlin. This is a multi-perspective fic, so we get to see stuff from Merlin's perspective and Arthur's perspective and how they both feel about each other and how their own insecurities kind of keep them away from this beautiful relationship that we get to see develop as the story progresses. And I also like how true the story is to the original canon, even though this is a divergence from it. It still holds a lot of the same feelings and character development that I loved about the original series. But it does it in such a way that is just new and exciting and gives me that satisfaction to see the romance between Arthur and Merlin blossom like it should have in the show. Again, if you know, you know, but just, I love this fic. This is a fic that I've read multiple times, and I just like decided to treat myself this month and read it again, and I'm so glad I did because it's just getting to that moment where they finally acknowledge their feelings for each other is just so good. It's so good. It feeds my soul every time, and this was no exception. I adored it. I loved it. I highly recommend this fic. Again, there's a link. Go read it. It's so much fun. And it's so sweet and it's so angsty. It's so angsty. I love a good hurt comfort fic, and this is a hurt comfort fic. I love just like hurt my favorite characters, but also just hold them so close and tightly as they recover. So good. And it is spicy. It is in fact spicy. There almost all the fics I've recommended so far have smut in it, so minus the Taizi, because that one's just a gen fic. Okay, but that is everything I read in the month of February. Again, I feel like I've done a lot of reading, and I feel like I did more reading than I thought I was doing, which is kind of fun and kind of great, but also kind of shocking. I really did not think I read as much as I did. And so going through everything was kind of a surprise. but a good one. But I hope you found some books you can possibly enjoy or some fanfictions you're thinking of giving a try. Again, I highly recommend them. They're all linked in the description down below. That is it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this video, consider leaving a thumbs up and a comment down below. Let me know what you read this month. What did you love? What did you hate? What did you DNF? I want to know what you guys are up to. It's one of my favorite things that we build about the community here. Let me know what you guys have been reading, what you're into, what are your plans, what did you start this month that you are going to continue reading next month? I want to know it all. Let me know. But that's it for me. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!